everyone, and welcome back. I've got a special treat for you today. I've got Lauren from LS Planning, and today she's joining me for the Ask Sarah segment where you guys submit your questions. We're going to chat about them, tell you what we would do or what we think you might should do, even though we're not lawyers or attorneys or anything. It's not legal advice. This is just us chatting for fun. But yeah, this is Lauren. I'm going to turn it over to her really quick, let her tell you all about her and what she's up to.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you. So yes, my name's Lauren Shoemaker. I own LS Planning and Co. I offer anywhere between month of coordination all the way up to full planning. I started my business a little less than a year ago, actually. So I am still a business newbie, but I have a love for planning. I started my planning business after planning my own wedding, actually. I, perfectly planned every single detail, but when it came down to the actual execution of my wedding, I didn't hire a day of coordinator. So that's where my mission of perfectly planned, perfectly executed comes through. So that way I can ensure that the execution comes through for all of my brides.
I love that. I too also did not have a day of coordinator at my wedding. I had the stereotypical, like a friend had offered to do it, and then the wedding day came around and she was like, actually, I just want to be a guest. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine.
Dang it.
Yeah, so I will preach day and night. Like you need to hire a planner who's a professional, not a friend, not a cousin, not your aunt, not your mom, someone else.
1,000%. No, it's so important just so your guests can have, the true guest experience, and you don't have to worry about having that eye contact across the room, like, oh my gosh, did you forget something? Or can you do this? It just having somebody who's there who represents you as a married couple is so important. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, love that. Yeah, so I knew I was like, I want Lauren to do the Ask Sarah segment. One, because you're a planner, but two, just because you're super cool. And I think you're going to have a good perspective on everything. So we've got three questions today. One is actually from Reddit, but I thought it was interesting. If you're a pop culture girly, you might appreciate it. So we'll just go ahead and dive right in. So the first question says, I was second shooting a wedding and really hit it off with the planner. The planner wants me to do a branding shoot for them. Is that in breach of the lead/second shooter agreement? I'm not supposed to advertise myself when second shooting, but the planner asked me specifically, should I tell the lead photographer or hope she doesn't find out?
Yeah, this was a good question. It really, really was. And from a planning perspective, relationship building is so incredibly important. But also maintaining your existing relationships is equally as important. So when I read this question, I was like, oh gosh, that's awesome. I'm so glad that they vibed really well, because that's so important in this industry, is to find people that you really connect with to then make magic with, right? So long story and long answer to say, yes, please tell the lead photographer that this happens, right? Like you want to maintain that existing relationship. Obviously the lead shooter did think that you were able to handle being a second shooter on that day, which is a big responsibility and task in and of itself. And that means they trust you and they like to work with you. So definitely maintain that initial relationship for sure. And I would definitely gauge the lead photographer's opinion before committing, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I also think too, like if you're second shooting a wedding and the planner specifically asks you and not the lead, that it's kind of like the planner, they chose you because who knows why? Maybe they liked your personality better. Not to say anyone's better than anybody else, but like sometimes you just jive with somebody. So that's kind of where I'm leaning to.
Mm-hmm.
Like the planner knows, like they know, like if you're the lead on a wedding day, you're like everyone's representing your business, whoever's working under you that day. So like
Mm-hmm.
that means that the planner wanted you specifically, and like that's just kind of part of the business. But yeah, I would definitely tell the lead photographer too, because one, they're going to find out when those images pop up and the planner is like tagging you in the images. So like you can't hide it. It's not going to happen. Um, But yeah, I
Yeah.
would tell the lead photographer. And you know what? If the lead photographer wants to like not be happy about it or even like talk to the planner about it, it's probably not going to change the fact that that planner still wanted to work with you
Mhm.
specifically. So, yeah, it is kind of a crappy situation. I think it's in the lead photographer's hands to like understand that this is just business. Like we are kind of a personality business. Sometimes it's just they jived better and so they got the opportunity and you didn't. I think it would be
Mhm.
a different situation if the second photographer was like networking with people at the wedding to like shoot their wedding. I think that's
Right.
different. But this is like professional. This is B2B. I don't know. I just think it's different. So I think it's fine. Tell the lead photographer if they want to make a stink about it, that's on them at that point, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And as planners as well, right? Like we represent so many people. If we feel that, somebody really, really we think would vibe well with a particular client, then, that's our job to seek out the best potential candidate for our client. And if it is not the lead and it's the second, then, so be it. But yes, honesty is always the best policy and being, upfront and just saying, hey, like, you know, this has happened. I wanted to let you know. And, as the second photographer to the lead, and just having that upfront level of communication, I think would be good in the relationships of all of the humans in that scenario.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think just like being honest too, like you can just tell the lead photographer really candidly, like, hey, I know that this might feel icky, but like they
Mhm.
asked me specifically, and it's an opportunity I'm going to take. I wanted to let you know out of courtesy. And, if they don't want to be mature about it, they don't have to be, but this business.
Yeah, this is business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of the game. Okay, well, I think we're in agreement on that one. So we'll move on to question two. Question two, this one is from a bride, or an engaged couple. So it says,
Mm.
my wedding photographer has gone silent. We did an engagement session and it was fine. My wedding is about 3 months out and my wedding photographer has gone silent. Won't answer text, emails, or DMs. It's been 2 weeks of trying to get in contact with them. I definitely don't want them doing my wedding now. What do I do and how do I get my money back?
Uh, um, so this as a planner is one of those scenarios that is kind of a worst nightmare. Because communication is so important. Ensuring that your couple feels confident in their decision throughout the whole process is really, really, really important. And if there has been an interim of ghosting or just non-responsiveness, I think that my best piece of advice was, to maybe have your planner reach out to the photographer, see if there, is any, response in that regard. In terms of getting your money back and, not having them do the wedding, you know, you are in a contract. So, that is the hard part. If the photographer doesn't really have a high level of self-awareness and knows, oh my gosh, like I really haven't been, speaking to this client for 2 weeks or whatever, it may be hard to get out of the contract, in short, right? Because it is a legal binding document. You can be taken to small claims court. Again, this is not legal advice. We're not lawyers, but it is a legal binding contract, right? So just, expressing that, you know, the level of service that we agreed to isn't being performed, is something that I think that if the photographer has a high level of self-awareness, they'll be like either coming back with an explanation and an apology, for ghosting, or saying, you know what, you were right. I kind of suck in this situation. I'm so sorry. I will give you your deposit back or refunded monies back. But your photographer, is one of those what I would consider high priority items for your wedding. They are somebody that you need to vibe with 1,000%. I understand one-off situations can happen, but really when you're budgeting and picking out these high priority, high ticket items, and vendors for your wedding, Homework is necessary. Hire a planner, hire a coordinator, talk to people, get references, look at portfolios. The back end research is required to hopefully avoid a situation like this.
Yeah, definitely. And so I've got a question too from a planner's perspective, because I know what I do, but I'd love to hear from you. Is there just like a standard time or like time length of communication? Like it's professional to respond within 24 business hours, 48 business hours, 72. Like, is it even appropriate? I mean, I don't think it's appropriate to go 2 weeks without speaking to your client if they're asking for you, unless like you're on vacation and they know or something. Like that's different.
Oh,
But yeah,
yeah,
what's your
no,
opinion on that?
100%. Communication again is key. So in the event, like as small business owners, we deserve some time off, right? Like we can go to the beach for a week and that's cool. But like again, communicate with your client, set an out of office, email response if that is something that you're going to be doing. Let people know on socials, don't just make it a story that's down within 48 hours or 24 hours or whatever. Like let your people know that you are not here. And emergencies happen and things happen and life happens and it sucks sometimes. But like at the end of the day, you somebody has invested their hard-earned money into your services. Um, and I'm a big advocate on the client's behalf always. So in the event that they feel like the service that they are receiving isn't what they agree to, then I'm going to go to bat for my people respectfully, of course. But,
Yeah.
just making sure, again, that communication is had in the event that they're going to be out of office for 2 weeks, if they're in Greece living their best life, or if they have a family emergency. Either way, let your people know.
Yes. Yeah. And I think like too, because weddings are what's considered like an unregulated industry, there's no governing body to wedding
Mhm.
vendors. There's a lot of people who think it's a fun, like easy way to make a lot of money. And it's not, by the way. But, there's just, I don't want to say riffraff because that sounds mean, but there is a lot of riffraff in the wedding industry, particularly at the lower price points. I feel like you don't run into this as much at the higher price points. But a lot of people are like, oh, I could use $500. Maybe I'll just become a photographer and shoot a wedding. And so, like, a lot of this stuff does happen. And
Mm.
people get ghosted and scammed a lot in the wedding industry because anyone can do it. And not everybody's an honest person. Um, but yeah, I would say like 2 weeks of trying to get in contact with the vendor and them not replying. At this point, I would consider yourself ghosted. And even if they did resurface, and I think that's where this gets tricky. If they did resurface, like, oh yeah, everything's fine. This person already is like, I don't want them doing my wedding now.
Right.
But like
That
you
trust
said, like they're
gets
in a
lost.
contract.
Mhm.
That's just messy. And so I think if you're a bride and you're looking at a contract, also if you're a vendor, this is something to add to your contract, have some kind of communication clause. So mine is like you can expect a response within 3 business days. So like I take the weekends off because that's when we're shooting and working. So like I'm completely MIA. But there might be days during the week where I've got a branding session that's the full day. So I'm not at my email, or I do take like personal days from time to time to sort out my
Mhm.
personal life. And so I'm not always responding the next day, but it's always going to be at least the next day, if not 72 hours during busy season. But I also let my clients know that, like, I'm not disappearing, but I am going to get back to you within like 3 business days at the maximum.
For sure, for sure. When I book a new client, you know, communication preferences and expectations are something that are laid out initially, right? Like I say if you don't hear a response within 48 hours, like that's unusual. Normally, if you don't hear a response within 48 minutes, that's unusual. I try to be really, really, really responsive to my clients and, understanding that, again, they invested into you. You are a luxury to have. And just having that mentality of like, somebody worked overtime to be able to afford you. You do owe a response and a timely one at that to your clients. And so, of course, if it's a wedding day, if you're doing a rehearsal, if you're doing setup, if you're doing a branding session, like of course responses will be not as timely, but you need to communicate with your people for sure.
100%. 100%. So, yeah, I mean, what do I do now and how do I get my money back? I would probably say like if they've truly ghosted you and they've disappeared, I would consider that money lost. You could try to like dispute it with your bank and see what happens, but unfortunately, like if someone disappears with your money, it's probably gone and they're probably gone. So
Mhm.
like, and that sucks and that's not fair, but that's just kind of what it is at this point. But if they do resurface, I would just have like a professional conversation with them and say like, "Hey, I didn't like that. That's not what I want for this like professional relationship. I don't want to work with you anymore. Please like refund this because that was not professional." And then just see where it goes from there because it's going to be different for every vendor.
For sure. And like you want to again have that level of trust with your photographer. They work so intimately with you guys, leading up to the wedding with your engagements, your bridals, your boudoir, with whatever you're shooting beforehand. And then like executing on the actual wedding day, like you can't redo that. You can't just be like, well, let's take it from the top again, right? Like that is a once and like one and done type of scenario. Like you can't you have to trust your vendor to take your photos and make sure that they are exactly what you wanted. And just having somebody that you trust to be able to to execute is so important. So for this particular person, I know all of us have a really expansive Rolodex of vendors we know and trust. So reach out to somebody, and I'm sure would be able to refer you to a person who we trust that is super responsive for sure.
Yes, definitely someone trustworthy because that's just ridiculous. And it's frustrating as professionals who like do this as a career to see stuff like this because it's like, oh, like I can almost guarantee that this person is new to the business or they're a scammer.
Yeah,
And it's annoying. I'm gonna be honest. And it sucks for you, whoever wrote this in, like that really sucks. I'm
for sure.
sorry.
For sure.
All right. So question 3. This one's actually from Reddit, but I saw it the other day and I was like, oh, this is fun. I want to talk about this. So, Nick Viall is he was on The Bachelor, right? Or maybe he was The Bachelor. I can't remember. Anyway, he's from that like universe, reality TV. And so he just married his current wife, Natalie. And so this post was from Reddit. It says on today's episode, and the episode was of Nick's podcast. On today's episode, Nick and Natalie went on and on about how demanding their vendors have been, wanting to be credited in the photos they share online. Nick mentioned he had offered for the vendors to provide their services in exchange for promoting them with their platform, but they all wanted to get paid. Go figure. The influencers expecting everything to be given them for free is so cringe, in my opinion. Then it sounds like Nick and Natalie have refused to give any public credit to the vendors since they made them pay for their services. And now they are threatening to bash them on the podcast and warn people not to use them. They sounded so pretentious, and I'm curious. No one in my circle is an influencer, but all my friends have loved to highlight our wedding vendors online and shout out small businesses and give credit where credit is due. What's the norm around this if you're an influencer? I also thought a lot of vendor requests to get tagged or listed as a vendor in the contract, question mark. Wait, I also thought a lot of, I don't know, that I guess she's asking, like, is it normal for vendors to ask? Are Nick and Natalie being as snobby as it sounds, or do they have a case? So I think, yeah, this
Yeah.
question feels like two parts. It's like what's normal for normal people, and then what's normal for influencers. But yeah, take it away, Lauren. I'm curious.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, just as like some general background information about the wedding industry and about your vendors, right? Is again, we are small business owners. We um really need the exposure and support from our couples to be able to thrive. And all of us, and I think I'm speaking broadly here, but all of us do have usually a provision in our contract that states, hey, whenever your Facebook post, your Instagram post, or your whatever post goes live, everybody played a part in making that happen. Especially your photographer, right? That's their art, that is their creative output that they have put in the time to tweak and edit and brush and expose and all of that. They need to make sure that they are given proper credits. Yes, it is your wedding. Yes, they are your photos, but all of us do have a provision in our contract that states, please support us, please tag us, at the very minimum, because that is how we are found. Um, a lot of times we're not found because people don't know we exist, right? And so, having just the simple 1 second, let me see who the planner was, let me see who the videographer was, and just tagging them in a post, that could make somebody's career, depending on what that post is, right? And so it is incredibly important to support and give back to your small businesses, especially if you had a really, really great experience. And even if you didn't, the contract does state, please tag us. My contract even says, if your friends or family were to post something from the wedding, if they're able to and they remember, send out a tag before a wedding even happens for my clients. 30 days out, that timeline is sent out to all of the vendors, and a vendor credit list is also sent out, right? And that is because giving people credit where credit is due is extremely important, and understanding that they also, like, even if they don't know everybody, like, it's the planner's responsibility, in my opinion, to make sure that those credit and those vendor credits are sent out, so that way when posts come out, we can all tag each other and it be one big happy family.
Yes, 100%. And I think like the influencer culture around weddings is different than influencing anything else because I don't know a wedding influencer. So like even if you were an influencer and you were tagging vendors, it's not actually going to result in business for us because if you're like not niched as a wedding influencer, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? People aren't going to be like, oh my gosh, so and so used this vendor, so I have to use them because your audience isn't engaged people. That's not like your niche. So, if I was selling a product and I needed you to push my product, that's different. But like being a wedding vendor, an influencer isn't going to do anything for my business. So no, I'm not going to work for free, period. Unless it's going to end up in like people, then okay, we'll talk.
Right.
But
If
like,
we're talking Vogue, then yes, we'll do a we'll do a discount.
right, if you're like actually famous, not Nick Viall, we'll talk. But like if you're an influencer, like a D-list celebrity, I can't work for free. I'm sorry. So yeah, I think it is cringy when anyone asks for free stuff from a small business, period, but also small businesses who are creatives, because it's even harder. And then two, just being like, you're going to get exposure. Well, exposure doesn't mean anything because you're not a wedding influencer. Engaged people aren't your audience. So it's not actually going to result in anything for me.
For sure, for sure. And as speaking to the vendor side of this, right? Your time is valuable. If you are not going to have a return on investment of your time, then you need to charge. Period. There's so much. I guess the culture around influencing is gotten a little out of hand, in my opinion, right? Like it. Yes, somebody can have 100,000 followers on Instagram, and yes, they can do whatever. And if it's Nick from The Bachelor or whoever, right? Like they're still humans. You're not reaching your exact target market. That you do need to still pay for services if that is the service that you're looking to have. With this one specifically, or like surrounding television, again, not a lawyer by any means, but I know like there was, especially with like the Netflix series and everything like that, they have very, very strict policies on like who shows up, when they talk, when they post, what happens, lots of provisions that go into like agreeing to be on a broadcast. So again, I'm not sure if that would be related in any way, like on if they were able to even like legally post with this, and support their small vendors. But yeah, I think it's just be a good person at the end of the day. Make sure make sure your people are tagged if they're providing you a service, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And it sounds like people told Nick and Natalie this because it says that they did end up paying their vendors, and that's why they feel like they don't have to tag them anymore because they paid them. And I think that this is also a misconception that if you pay for a photographer or a videographer, that you own those assets and you don't actually. And this is very confusing. And this is kind of where it's like, I'm not a lawyer, so like grain of salt here. But when you hire a photographer and a videographer, they own the copyright to
Mhm.
those things. They still own them. But you, as the client, receive some kind of license to be able to use it for personal use, which means you cannot profit off of the photos or videos. So you, as the client, couldn't sell them and make money, but the person who owns the copyright can.
Mhm.
So this might also be part of, I would imagine behind the scenes, this is probably part of it because I'm sure Nick and Natalie were like, we want to own everything so that we can sell it to the magazines, we can sell these images to whatever. And technically, the photographer is the only person who has the right to sell them like that. And so, like, the photographer would be getting that money. So, I'm sure that's not mentioned here, but I'm sure that was also a conversation behind the scenes, given their attitude around the whole thing.
Yes, for sure. And that's a great point as well. I'm glad you mentioned that because again, ownership and copyright and, that there's so many legalities surrounding content and how and why and all of the things. So I'm really glad you brought that up because yeah, that's a point that is definitely driven home here, but and underneath the scenes for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But it sounds like, yeah, they paid for it. So now they think that they can do whatever they want, but you can't. Sorry.
I don't know.
Not how it works.
Oh my.
But yes, so the last question was, are Nick and Natalie being snobby or do they have a case? No, they're being snobby. They're trying to use their status to like bully small businesses, which is cringy.
That is a little cringy. Yeah. Yeah. Again, be a good person.
Yeah,
They don't seem like they're good people.
that's right. Yeah.
Judging by
And check your contracts. If you're required to tag people and you sign that contract, that's the end of the conversation.
that. Mhm.
And if you're a
A
vendor,
thousand.
put it in your contract.
Yeah. Yeah. A thousand%. And then also on the flip side of that, read your contracts as well. There,
Mhm.
if you click find and then F and then do a hotkey. You can, if you there's a certain point you need to do, just go ahead and search it. It whatever you sign is legally binding. And then vendors on the flip side as well, right? Make sure that if there is a certain point that you want to hit home, put it in the contract. Invest in the attorney. It will save you money in the long run by putting in a provision that is really important for you to protect your small business for sure.
Definitely. So we've got like 10 minutes left in our typical episode length. So we can actually squeak in one more question that I
Oh,
think is interesting. Uh,
okay.
this one's a surprise, so totally candid from us,
Yeah.
guys.
Love it.
So this one reads, I'm a wedding photographer and I have in my contract that I am required a meal at dinner. The catering company is giving my couple a hard time about it. What is normal? Question mark.
So you are legally obligated to feed your vendors in the state of North Carolina. So some vendors, like your DJ, photographer, planner, people that are going to be there all day with you, in their contract, it will read whether or not they need a meal, how many meals that they are allowed if you have an associate or a second shooter or what have you. But some vendors also have that they're going to eat what everybody else eats and not get a box meal. And I've seen it both ways. At the end of the day, personally, I don't care what I eat as long as I'm fed. Because I will, as a wedding vendor, right? Like you probably have a single sip of water and a cucumber slice all day, right? Like
Yeah.
you're gonna be smashing whatever they give you at the end of the
Yeah.
day, personally.
And by all day, like we literally mean 10 to 8 hours without eating. Like once we arrive on site, it's go, go, go. And
For
yeah,
sure.
so yeah, carry on. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that, I think that like understanding like what exactly happens on the back end in terms of like the actual execution and making sure you're present for your clients, like you're not gonna have time to eat. And that was like when I got into this industry, I was like, dang, like am I like okay? Am I running on E? I'm like I didn't even go up and pee today, like because I have not had any water, right? Like
Yeah,
we're actually surviving.
it is.
But no, feed your vendors, make sure your vendors have somewhere to sit. I can't tell you how many times I've been crouched in a corner, popping in an appetizer to survive, right? But no, make sure your vendors have a place to sit, make sure they're fed, whether it's a catering meal or a box vendor meal. Your caterer should not give you a hard time on this. Your vendors should be included in your head count and your final numbers for your actual wedding day.
Yeah,
And again, if you have a full planner or a partial planner or even a month of coordinator, just making sure that those vendors and how many associates they will have are included in that final count is super, super important.
definitely. Yeah, and I think it's also up to the caterer's discretion how they handle vendor meals. So like in our contract, I don't have anything about the kind of meal. So like if the
Mhm.
caterer provides boxed meals for vendors, whatever. I think that's kind of rude on the caterer's part, but like whatever, it's food, I'll eat it. Um, but I also think like it's up to the caterer's discretion if they charge a full head like number for that meal. If it's seated service, I feel like it gets really tricky too. Um, like sometimes these meals are like $200 a head. And, if you have to pay that as the client because that's in your contract with your vendors, that's not like that's on you and the caterer to like sort that out. And the caterer gets to decide if they charge that full price or if they're going to give you a discount for vendors or if they're just going to provide different food for vendors. But either way, it's something you and your caterer need to work out. Not like me as the photographer or videographer can't go to your caterer and be like, hey, we require a meal, so just charge it to the client. Like that's not our responsibility to do. It's your responsibility as the bride or the groom. And then maybe even along with your planner, y'all need to work that out. And any good planner is going to be like, okay, what vendor meals do we need before we send stuff into the
Yes,
catering
you
team?
have
But if you don't have a planner, you
them.
have to do it. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly. No, making sure that that you're well fed, and then on the client end as well, right? Like for a planning perspective, when I'm doing a day of coordination for you, I am there from 8 a.m. when we can access the bridal suite to like 1 a.m. sometimes, packing up and cleaning up and all of the things. So yeah, don't forget to feed us. We need a little bit of fuel to make sure that everything goes well. We are running around like crazy human beings, making sure that everything goes perfectly for you guys. So if you have breakfast bagels that are delivered, if you have one left over, just let somebody know. Let us take a bite. Give us some fuel. And most clients that I've had are like, oh my gosh, like please eat. Here's some hummus, here's a cucumber, here is a bagel, like, you
yeah,
know,
here's
please,
lunch.
please. Yes,
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 I've
exactly.
never I've never had pushback from a couple, but I have had issues with caterers. And particularly with caterers not being fed on time to get back to work. And so
Mhm.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation, is just the logistics of it. And the caterers have a lot of logistics to work out too, especially if it's seated service. It's just a different game. But I think, and not everyone agrees on when and how vendors should eat, which is also frustrating because everyone seems to agree except for caterers. They kind of want to do things whatever's going to work for them. But yeah, I think we could go very deep into this conversation. But
For
yes,
sure.
I
And
think
then
if the
for vendors, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I think if the caterer is giving you a hard time as like the photographer, it's time for you to bow out. The couple needs to handle it.
Yes. And so I think in that retrospect, I think the planner needs to handle it because the couple are going to be like, a couple mimosas in, make sure your event manager or your day of coordinator or your planner is aware. I literally, when I work in events, when the couple eats and they're sitting, before I am standing next to them, like guarding them to make sure that none of the family, like their family members come up and they're like, long day on the road, how y'all doing? They need to sit and eat. And whenever the couple sits and eats, that's when I'm like, DJ, videographer, content, photo, go get your food. Go get your food.
Yeah.
Go eat.
Yeah. Because our job is to be with the couple at all times.
And I don't know about you, but I know that if I were a bride, I would not need a photo of me stuffing my face with mac and cheese.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Okay, yeah. So we're in agreement. Like you can hand that entire thing off to the planner and the couple and just say, like, look, it's in my contract. Y'all go. Y'all need to handle it with the caterer. But yeah, that is frustrating. Well, that's all the questions we had for today, plus our bonus question.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It was so good to kind of chat through all of these topics, and get some alternative perspectives as well from some of the people that had sent these questions in. So I hope it was helpful. And again, Sarah, thank you so much for having me. It was so good to chat it out with you. You're amazing. So yeah, thanks again.
Thanks for coming on. And I'm sure I'll have you back because there's so many topics we could cover. Everything from like styled shoots to like crazy stories to even like weird, unique situations like this. But yeah, this was so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I hope you have a good rest of your Memorial Day.
Yes, that's right. Do you have the day off? Do we ever have a day off?
No, I was going to say we don't really ever. No. So it'll be a little bit more relaxed. So
that's right. Same here. Same here. All right. Well, until next time.
Bye.
Bye.